Hashtag at the 4th of July barbecue, they gave everyone steak, I got a hot dog. So I left in my Tesla and canceled the mortgage. The smell of charcoal and the sound of fireworks filled the air at my in-laws' annual 4th of July barbecue in their pristine Westchester County backyard. I stood there in my simple sundress from Target, watching my husband Marcus laugh with his family while they grilled premium steaks on their massive outdoor kitchen setup. The humidity was suffocating, matching the weight I felt pressing down on my chest as I realized what was about to happen. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and at 28, I thought I had found my place in the world when I married into the wealthy Patterson family 3 years ago. Marcus was everything my mother had dreamed of for me: Harvard MBA, successful investment banker, old money family with connections that opened doors I'd never even known existed. Coming from a working-class Puerto Rican family in the Bronx, I felt like Cinderella when he proposed. But fairy tales, I was learning, don't prepare you for the reality of living with people who see you as a charity case. Rebecca, honey, could you help me carry these plates? Marcus's mother, Patricia Patterson, appeared beside me with her perfectly styled silver hair and that smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was the type of woman who wore pearls to backyard barbecues and somehow made it look effortless rather than overdressed. I followed her to the outdoor serving area, where she'd arranged an impressive spread of sides: artisanal potato salad, grilled vegetables, fresh corn on the cob, and a selection of gourmet sauces. The steaks were still cooking, thick ribeyes and filet mignons that probably cost more per pound than I used to spend on groceries for a week. I thought you might prefer something lighter, Patricia said, her voice dripping with false concern as she handed me a paper plate with a single hot dog on it. Not even a good hot dog, one of those cheap grocery store brands that comes in a pack of 8 for $3. I stared at the sad excuse for a meal while around us, Marcus's siblings and their spouses received generous portions of steak, perfectly grilled and seasoned. His brother James got 2 pieces. His sister Caroline's husband received the largest filet mignon I'd ever seen. Even the neighbors who'd been invited were served the good meat. "Oh, this is fine," I said automatically, the words coming out like they always did when I wanted to avoid confrontation. But inside, something was cracking. This wasn't about the food, it was about what the food represented. After 3 years of marriage, I was still the outsider getting the scraps. I just thought, you know, given your background, Patricia continued with that patronizing tone she'd perfected, you might not be used to such rich food. We wouldn't want you to get an upset stomach. My background. Code 4, you're not really one of us, and we're never going to let you forget it. Marcus appeared at my side, his arms sliding around my waist in that possessive way that used to make me feel protected but now felt more like ownership. "Mom's just being thoughtful," he said, completely missing, or choosing to ignore, the humiliation blazing in my eyes. "You know how those fancy steaks can be heavy." That's when it hit me. He knew. He'd known this was going to happen, and he'd let it. Maybe he'd even suggested it. I looked around at the family gathering with new eyes. Marcus's cousin David was telling stories about his latest business acquisition while his wife showed off photos from their recent trip to the French Riviera. Caroline was discussing her daughter's acceptance to an elite private school that cost more per year than many people's salaries. James was complaining about having to fire his 3rd housekeeper this year because she didn't arrange his ties properly. And there I sat with my hot dog, smiling and nodding like the grateful little charity case they all saw me as. But here's what they didn't know about my background, what even Marcus had never bothered to learn about the woman he'd married. Growing up in the Bronx with my single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, I'd learned that survival meant being resourceful. While other kids were playing video games, I was teaching myself coding from library books because our ancient computer could barely run basic programs. By 15, I was building websites for local businesses for $50 each. By 18, I had a full scholarship to NYU's computer science program, not because anyone handed it to me, but because I'd earned it through pure determination and talent. I'd met Marcus during my senior year when he was getting his MBA. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my dreams of starting my own tech company. We dated through my final year of college, and he proposed right after I graduated. I was so swept up in the romance, so flattered that someone from his world had chosen me, that I put my career plans on hold to be the supportive wife he needed as he climbed the corporate ladder. For 3 years, I'd played the role perfectly. I'd learned which fork to use at fancy dinners, how to make small talk at charity galas, and how to dress appropriately for country club events. I'd suppressed my accent, softened my opinions, and made myself smaller in 100 different ways to fit into their world. But as I sat there with that pathetic hot dog, watching Marcus laugh at his brother's joke about knowing your place in the pecking order, something inside me finally snapped. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead of heading inside, I walked around to the front of the house where I'd parked my car. It wasn't much, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Marcus constantly complained about, saying it was embarrassing to be seen in. "When are you going to let me buy you a proper car?" he'd ask, never understanding that the Honda represented independence to me. It was paid off, reliable, and most importantly, mine. But as I stood there looking at my little car, I realized I was tired of being embarrassed by the things that represented my journey. I was tired of apologizing for who I was and where I'd come from. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been thinking about for months but never had the courage to do. I opened my laptop bag, yes, I still carried it everywhere, another thing Marcus found unprofessional, and pulled out the business proposal I'd been working on in secret. For the past year, while playing the dutiful wife role during the day, I'd been spending my nights developing a revolutionary app that would help small businesses manage their online presence more effectively. It combined social media scheduling, basic e-commerce functionality, and customer relationship management into one affordable, user-friendly platform. I'd already built a working prototype and had 3 beta clients who were seeing incredible results. The proposal in my hands was for venture capital funding. 2 different firms had expressed serious interest after seeing my initial pitch, but I'd been too scared to move forward. Marcus had made it clear that he didn't want his wife playing entrepreneur and embarrassing the family with some little hobby business. But sitting in my Honda outside that house where I'd just been served a hot dog like some kind of afterthought, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Jennifer Walsh, the venture capitalist who'd been most enthusiastic about my app. It was a Saturday afternoon, but I knew she'd told me to call any time if I was ready to move forward. "Rebecca." Her voice was warm and energetic even over the phone. "Please tell me you're calling with good news." "I'm ready," I said, and as I spoke the words, I felt a surge of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. "I want to proceed with the funding." "That's fantastic. Can you come in Monday morning? I'd like to introduce you to my partners and start the due diligence process immediately. Based on your numbers and the client feedback you've shown me, I think we can move very quickly on this." After hanging up, I sat in my car for a few more minutes, listening to the sounds of the party continuing in the backyard. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses filled with expensive wine. A world I'd tried so hard to belong to, but that would never truly accept me. I started the Honda and drove away without saying goodbye. Marcus called my phone 6 times before I finally answered as I was pulling into the parking lot of my favorite Dominican restaurant in the Bronx, the neighborhood I'd grown up in and abandoned for his world. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was sharp with the kind of anger that used to make me immediately apologetic. "My mother is asking about you, and I look like an idiot." "I'm having dinner," I said calmly, watching families enjoy their Saturday evening together at the outdoor tables. Real families who didn't measure each other's worth by bank account balances. "Dinner? Rebecca, we're at a family gathering. You can't just disappear like this. It's rude and frankly embarrassing." "You want to know what's embarrassing, Marcus? Being married to someone for 3 years and still being treated like hired help at family events." "Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. Mom was just trying to be considerate about your dietary preferences." "My dietary preferences?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marcus, when have I ever expressed any dietary preferences that would suggest I can't eat steak?" He was quiet for a moment. "Look, just come back. We can talk about this later." "No, I don't think we can." I took a deep breath. "I'm done talking, Marcus. I'm done apologizing for who I am, where I come from, and what I'm capable of. I'm especially done pretending that your family's treatment of me is acceptable. You're overreacting to one misunderstanding." "It's not one misunderstanding. It's 3 years of misunderstandings. It's your mother buying me clothes because mine aren't suitable. It's your father explaining basic concepts to me like I'm a child. It's you introducing me as your wife from the city, like I'm some exotic pet you picked up. My voice was getting stronger with each word. And it's you standing by and letting it all happen because deep down, you agree with them. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked about my business ideas? When's the last time you supported any of my ambitions instead of suggesting I focus on being a better wife? He couldn't answer, which was answer enough. I'll be staying at my mother's place for a while, I said finally. We can discuss the details later. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 3 years, I was completely unreachable to the Patterson family, and it felt liberating. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity that reminded me who I really was underneath the polished facade I'd been wearing. Jennifer's venture capital firm moved faster than I'd expected, and within 2 weeks, I had a preliminary offer for $2.3 million in funding for my app. But more than the money, what excited me was being back in my element. The due diligence meetings, the technical discussions about scalability and market penetration, the strategic planning sessions, this was where I belonged. Not at country club brunches making small talk about vacation homes, but in conference rooms solving problems and building something meaningful. I moved back to the Bronx temporarily, staying in my childhood bedroom while I looked for a proper apartment. My mother, Elena, had been skeptical about my marriage from the beginning, though she'd been too polite to say much. But as I told her about the barbecue incident and my decision to leave, her relief was obvious. Mija, she said in her mix of English and Spanish that I'd learned to suppress around the Pattersons, I was wondering when you were going to remember who you are. That family, they never saw you. They saw a project. She was right. Marcus had fallen in love with the idea of me, the brilliant, beautiful woman from the wrong side of the tracks who he could rescue and mold into the perfect society wife. He'd never actually fallen in love with me, the real me, with all my ambitions and rough edges and determination to build something of my own. The divorce proceedings were predictably ugly. Marcus's family had resources and connections, but what they didn't have was any legal basis for keeping me from what was rightfully mine. Since I'd put my career on hold to support his, I was entitled to significant alimony. More importantly, the prenup his family had insisted on had a clause that became relevant when he was the one who'd been unfaithful, something I discovered when I hired a private investigator. Apparently, Marcus had been having an affair with his secretary for 8 months. The same secretary he'd assured me was just a professional relationship when I'd expressed concerns about how often he texted her. But here's the beautiful part of this story, by the time the divorce was finalized, I didn't need his money anymore. My app, which I'd named Local Boost, launched 3 months after I left that barbecue. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Small business owners loved having a single platform that could handle their social media, basic e-commerce, and customer communications without requiring a computer science degree to operate. Within 6 months, we had over 10,000 active users paying monthly subscription fees. Within a year, that number had grown to 50,000. Major publications were featuring Local Boost as one of the most innovative small business solutions in the market. I was invited to speak at conferences, featured on the covers of entrepreneurship magazines, and approached by companies wanting to acquire my technology. But the real victory came 18 months after that 4th of July barbecue, when I pulled up to Patricia Patterson's house in my brand new Tesla Model S. I wasn't there to gloat or create drama. Marcus had been pestering me through lawyers about some financial documents that had gotten mixed up during our separation, and I'd finally agreed to stop by to resolve the matter quickly and professionally. Patricia answered the door, and her face went through a fascinating series of expressions when she saw me. The Tesla in her driveway. My confidence, no longer hidden behind apologetic smiles. The designer outfit I was wearing, not because I was trying to fit in, but because I genuinely liked it and could afford whatever I wanted now. Rebecca, she said, her voice carefully controlled. You look, well. Thank you. I feel well. I handed her the folder of documents. These are the papers Marcus needed. Everything's organized and labeled. She glanced through them, then looked back at me with something I'd never seen from her before, genuine curiosity rather than dismissive judgment. I heard about your business success, she said carefully. Marcus mentioned that you've done quite well for yourself. I have. I smiled, and this time it wasn't the pleasing, placating smile I used to give her. It was confident, authentic, real. Turns out all those years of being underestimated were excellent motivation. There was an uncomfortable pause. Then, to my surprise, Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "Several apologies, actually. I realize now that I didn't treat you with the respect you deserved." It was the last thing I'd expected to hear from her. "Patricia, that's..." "No, let me say this." She looked genuinely uncomfortable, which was also something I'd never seen before. "I spent so much time worrying about whether you were good enough for our family that I never bothered to see what kind of person you actually were. That was unfair to you, and it was unfair to Marcus too." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but she seemed genuinely sincere. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Marcus is miserable," she said simply. "He's been miserable since you left, and watching him struggle has made me realize what we lost when we pushed you away. You weren't the problem, Rebecca. We were." It was a moment of honesty I never could have imagined from her, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy. "Patricia, I appreciate you saying that. I really do. But some things can't be undone." "I know." She nodded sadly. "I just wanted you to know that we were wrong. About you, about your worth, about everything." As I drove away from that house for what I knew would be the last time, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. Not just financially, though the success of Local Boost had given me security I'd never dreamed of. More importantly, I'd reclaimed myself, my ambition, my voice, my sense of worth that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. The business continued to grow beyond my wildest projections. We expanded to include features for restaurants, retail stores, service providers, and creative professionals. I hired a team of brilliant developers and customer service specialists, many of them people like me who'd been underestimated by traditional tech companies. Our office in Manhattan became known for its collaborative culture and innovative approaches to solving real-world problems. But perhaps the most rewarding part of my success was the impact Local Boost had on small business owners across the country. I regularly received emails from entrepreneurs who told me our platform had helped them grow their businesses, support their families, and achieve dreams they'd thought were impossible. Maria, who ran a bakery in Phoenix, wrote to tell me that Local Boost had helped her triple her online orders during the pandemic. James, who'd started a landscaping company in Atlanta, credited our platform with helping him organize his client communications well enough to expand from a one-man operation to a team of 12 employees. These stories reminded me daily why I had started the company, not for personal wealth or recognition, but to level the playing field for people who had great ideas but lacked access to expensive marketing and management tools. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected phone call. Marcus wanted to meet for coffee to discuss something important. Against my better judgment and the advice of my friends, I agreed to see him. He looked older when we met at a neutral coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan. The confident swagger that had initially attracted me had been replaced by something more subdued, almost humble. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes before he got to the point. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice sincere in a way I'd rarely heard during our marriage. "Not just for the barbecue thing, though that was inexcusable. For all of it. For not seeing who you really were, for not supporting your ambitions, for letting my family treat you badly." I sipped my latte and studied his face. "Marcus, we've been divorced for over a year. Why are you telling me this now?" He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our dating days. "Because I've been watching your success from afar, and I realize what an idiot I was. You were always extraordinary, Rebecca. I just was too insecure and too influenced by my family's prejudices to see it." Insecure. That was not a word I would ever have associated with Marcus Patterson. "Yeah, insecure. You want to know the truth? I was intimidated by your intelligence from the day we met. You saw solutions to problems that I couldn't even identify. You understood technology and innovation in ways that made my business degree look like finger painting. So instead of celebrating that and supporting you, I tried to make you smaller so I could feel bigger." His honesty was surprising, but it didn't change the fundamental issues between us. "Marcus, I appreciate your apology. I really do. But I'm not asking you to take me back, he said quickly. I know that ship has sailed, and honestly, you deserve better than what I was capable of giving you then. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I threw away. We talked for another hour about our respective lives, the lessons we'd learned, the ways we'd both grown since our separation. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and while it didn't change anything between us, it provided a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. As we prepared to part ways, Marcus asked one final question. Are you happy, Rebecca? Really, genuinely happy? I thought about my life as it was now. The thriving business that challenged and fulfilled me daily. The apartment in Soho that I'd decorated exactly to my taste without worrying about anyone else's approval. The relationship I'd recently started with David, a fellow entrepreneur who celebrated my success rather than feeling threatened by it. The reconnection with my own culture and family that I'd lost during my marriage. Yes, I said with complete certainty. I'm happier than I ever thought possible. And I meant it. 6 months later, Local Boost was acquired by a major tech company for $127 million. I could have retired at 31 and lived comfortably for the rest of my life, but that wasn't what I wanted. Instead, I used my portion of the acquisition money to start a venture capital fund focused specifically on supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs, women, minorities, first-generation immigrants, and others whose potential is often overlooked by traditional investors. The fund, which I named Second Chances Capital, has already helped launch dozens of successful businesses across various industries. Every time I meet with a prospective entrepreneur who reminds me of myself, brilliant, determined, but dismissed by others because they don't fit the expected mold, I remember that 4th of July barbecue and the hot dog that changed my life. Because that's what it really was, a catalyst that forced me to stop accepting less than I deserved and start building the life I actually wanted. Last week, I was featured on the cover of Forbes as one of the most influential venture capitalists under 40. The article mentioned my background, my journey from the Bronx to business success, and my commitment to funding entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds. When I saw the magazine on newsstands, I thought about how different my life might have been if I'd stayed at that barbecue, accepted that hot dog, and continued to make myself small to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. But I didn't stay. I left, I bet on myself, and I built something extraordinary. If you're watching this video and you've ever felt like you were being served a hot dog while everyone else got steak, metaphorically speaking, I want you to know that you have the power to change your circumstances. Maybe not immediately, maybe not without struggle and uncertainty, but you absolutely have the power to refuse to accept less than you deserve. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions of you. Your potential isn't limited by their lack of imagination. And your success doesn't require their permission or approval. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being underestimated, because it frees you from the pressure to meet other people's expectations and allows you to exceed your own. That hot dog at the barbecue wasn't an insult, it was an invitation. An invitation to stop apologizing for who I was and start celebrating what I could become. And driving away in my Tesla 2 years later wasn't about showing off or getting revenge. It was about showing up as my authentic self, successful and confident and unapologetically ambitious, in a space where I'd once felt small and unwelcome. The mortgage I canceled wasn't just a financial decision, it was symbolic of canceling all the debts I'd felt I owed to people who never valued my contributions anyway. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better than scraps. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about people who turned their lowest moments into launching pads for extraordinary success. And most importantly, tell us in the comments about a time when you chose to bet on yourself instead of accepting someone else's limitations. Because everyone deserves a seat at the table, and everyone deserves the steak, not the hot dog. Your turn to leave the barbecue and build something beautiful.